Oh man, guys, this is big. This is truly momentous. Ever since its launch in 2017, Cardano and everyone involved in it, that's you and me and all of us, we've all been navigating our way through this very, very difficult maze. That maze is the maze you end up in when you're actually trying to solve the blockchain trilemma: decentralization, scaling, security. When you're trying to achieve all these things simultaneously, it's a very, very difficult, complex balancing act. And our competitors, they weren't in that maze. They all chose a different way. They all chose to solve a less difficult problem. They always scoffed at us for doing everything the hard way. Why don't you just use account balance? Why not use the EVM? Why would you use UTXO? Why not go the VC route? Why so much focus on finality and safety and local predictability of fees? Why true liquid staking? Why stick to your guns on decentralization? We just kept navigating the very difficult maze. That is until last week, when suddenly the walls of the maze parted. And for the first time, we could see our way to the end. Welcome to the Cardano EndGame. If you're like, I don't care at all about any endgame, I'm just here for the ducats, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. It's very hard to exaggerate how huge this is in the history of Cardano. On October 23rd, Cardano went to bed as that chain with all the papers, and it woke up to the biggest surprise in the history of Cardano. I would say easily the most important thing to happen since Goguen. You remember Goguen? That happened right around the time of the 2021 Wyoming Cardano Summit. That was that fork where we got smart contracts. At that point, that was the biggest thing to happen in Cardano. And it was a huge thing we were all looking forward to. I would argue this is easily the biggest thing to happen in Cardano since then. And actually, I would argue maybe, I mean, this couldn't have happened without Goguen, but this might even be more important than Goguen. The two things are kind of intertwined. So we'll just say the most important thing since Goguen, but maybe, arguably the most important thing ever. It was all because of this announcement from Bitcoin OS. And basically, the announcement boiled down to, hey, how about if Cardano from now on is Bitcoin's smart contract platform? Now, we can have a lot of debates over the next like 10, 20 years about terminology. The Bitcoin people are going to say this is Cardano becoming a Bitcoin layer, becoming Bitcoin's smart contract layer, some kind of a Bitcoin L2, if you will. In Cardano, we're going to argue not that this is Cardano becoming a Bitcoin layer. Maybe this is Bitcoin becoming a Cardano asset layer. Not that we're becoming the Bitcoin smart contract layer. Maybe we argue this is Bitcoin, becoming a sort of sister chain that, feeds assets into our Cardano main chain. Of course, the economic disparity between the two chains, the market cap of Bitcoin versus the market cap of Cardano. On the Cardano side, we're all going to be happy and probably not say anything when the Bitcoin guys say Cardano just became a Bitcoin layer, because we want that huge amount. What is it right now? 1.2 trillion dollars worth of assets. We want all those assets to flow into the Cardano ecosystem. And that was the potential of this announcement. This announcement was not, hey, Cardano, why don't you do all the smart contract stuff for Bitcoin? I mean, that's a part of it. But the important part that entails is that all of this economic value in Bitcoin could flow into Cardano to do all of the cool smart contract stuff that comes with the increased expressiveness of Cardano. So, if you've watched this channel for a long time, you've probably seen all the videos we've done, all the segments we've done where we've discussed the evolution of Bitcoin, the block size wars, which I kind of lived through firsthand on the Bitcoin subreddit, and all the things that led us to Bitcoin being what it is today. This very long tenured blockchain, the blockchain that everyone becomes familiar with as the first thing they encounter sort of in crypto, the very first time they hear about crypto. But it is a blockchain that has very small blocks as a result of the block size wars and sort of a commitment to not changing. And that includes not increasing its expressiveness, which is something we've talked about also a lot on this channel. If you have a blockchain with very low expressiveness, you can't have all of the complexities of smart contracts that we have on blockchains like Ethereum and Cardano and Solana and Avalanche and all of these smart contract blockchains. It's just something that Bitcoin has refused to do. And a lot of maximalists in the Bitcoin community are pretty comfortable with that. They've sort of rationalized it by saying that no one actually needs this expressiveness and this increased complexity on blockchains like Ethereum and Cardano and so on. But not everybody was satisfied with that. Not everybody was happy. Everybody was happy, at least everybody who stayed in Bitcoin seemed to be pretty happy with its ability to do the very basic things it does, which is basically send Bitcoin around. It's a ledger to record the movement of Bitcoin, and that's pretty much all it does. People were happy with that part. It does that job pretty well. But a lot of people were unhappy with the inability to do all those things that come with increased expressiveness. And that sentiment led to the creation of this project, Bitcoin OS. And I'll let the founder of Bitcoin OS tell you exactly what they've been up to and where they're trying to go.
Cardano is a very special chain. It is by far the largest, most significant chain built as a UTXO system like Bitcoin and with a long-term view of the world like Bitcoin. But it too cannot interact with Bitcoin. And so the big announcement that we have today is that that is changing. That we have a major change coming for the entire world of Bitcoin, the world of Cardano, the world of crypto, and the world of finance as a whole. Because for the first time, those two parallel lines, which were never to touch, are bending towards each other. We are now able, through Bitcoin OS, to verify on Bitcoin mainnet zero-knowledge proofs. And this gives Bitcoin brains and eyes. For the first time, we can build smart contracts on Bitcoin, and we can give Bitcoin the ability to see what is happening on other chains. And possibly the most important chain to do this with is Cardano. What this means is that we will soon have the ability to trustlessly bridge assets from Bitcoin to Cardano and vice versa. We will also have the ability to utilize the smart contract capacity of Cardano to write smart contracts that execute on Bitcoin mainnet, turning Cardano into a smart contract platform for the largest asset base in the world. We're looking at an entirely new phase for Bitcoin, Cardano, crypto, and finance, and I'm super excited to be able to discuss it here on this panel first. Thank you.
Obviously, that sounds great on our side in Cardano. And as soon as that news dropped, everybody rightfully got really excited. It's like, what? Some crazy Bitcoin maximalist got sick of the lack of functionality in Bitcoin. So he built this thing involving zero knowledge proofs that somehow turns Cardano into the smart contract platform, the smart contract layer for Bitcoin. Obviously, we're not going to say no to that on the Cardano side. And it immediately started trending. You could see here, this wasn't long after the announcement. Cardano integrates with Bitcoin via Bitcoin OS Grail Bridge. But This is still Cardano. So we never trust, we always verify. So the first thing to figure out was, can they actually verify zero knowledge proofs on the Bitcoin base layer? Here's the post from Bitcoin OS. We have done it. For the first time ever, a ZK proof has been verified on Bitcoin mainnet by Bitcoin OS. The final verification was confirmed in block 853626, a historic moment and a historic block. A new era has begun for Bitcoin, enabling unlimited scaling and functionality. No soft fork required. Here's how we did it. And they have a whole thread explaining how they did it. And this happened back in July. Okay, the next question to address, now that we know that zero knowledge proofs are actually verifiable on the Bitcoin base layer, the next question is, hey, wait a second. We've always known that bridges are often, maybe you could say even say largely, but definitely you could say often, they're often subject to the evils of the robbery forest. Bridges are a place where a lot of robberies take place. And in fact, oftentimes we figure out that a bridge was just a bridge inside the robbery forest. It was like the main bridge inside the robbery forest, and everybody's shocked when they get robbed on the bridge. So we did use the word bridge. Bitcoin OS is calling this thing the Grail Bridge. So next we have to talk about what this thing actually does. Is it actually a bridge, or are we just using that word? Are we just using that word for lack of a better word so that people understand what's going on? Let's delve into that subject right now. This is an article on the Bitcoin OS blog. You can find this right on their website. The article is called Cardano Comes Home to Bitcoin, and it was published on the 24th, the day all this news dropped. So the important section here for our purposes today is this section. Emergo, a founding entity of Cardano, will be developing using Bitcoin OS to bring Bitcoin's ocean of liquidity, more on that later, to the Cardano network via the Grail Bridge, which will allow for the trustless bridging of BTC and other Bitcoin assets with Cardano. So already we have a hint here as to how this is different. They're talking about trustless bridging. That implies there is no intermediary, because the big problem with the bridges has been that there are always these intermediaries. They're always centralized, and the robbers, the villains, the thieves, the hackers, the exploiters, they always exploit this centralization of the bridges. But here we're talking about a trustless bridge, according to Bitcoin OS. It's the first time an L1 chain, aside from Bitcoin, will allow its users to store and transfer BTC in a decentralized fashion. And there they're talking about, Cardano allowing its users to store and transfer BTC in a decentralized fashion. Whereas in Cardano, we'd probably put it, hey, we're going to allow you Bitcoin guys to use Cardano. But here we get into the meat of it. Grail Bridge uses zero knowledge cryptography to let Bitcoin users move their BTC to other chains without needing to trust custodians or intermediaries. Bitcoin OS was the first to verify a ZK proof on Bitcoin, July 2024. We just talked about that. And they're also open source. Trustless bridging is the first most crucial infrastructure for being able to transform every blockchain into a layer on top of Bitcoin and to unite all of crypto. It gives Cardano users access to the Bitcoin ecosystem, gives BTC holders trustless access to Cardano's superior scalability and application suite, and gives both networks enhanced interoperability. And then they talk about how great Cardano is. You notice there, though, they said they could do this with every other blockchain. Every other blockchain could become a layer on top of Bitcoin via Bitcoin OS. But as the founder of Bitcoin OS pointed out in that video we just watched, there are certain things about Cardano, like the fact that it's UTXO. We're UTXO, the same as Bitcoin. Bitcoin wallets are UTXO. We have this huge advantage over all of the chains in the account balance world. All these years, they said, why do you have to do it so differently? Why can't you be like Ethereum? You could just use the EVM and be account balance. Cardano instead decided to do it the hard way. They decided to invent EUTXO, extended unspent transaction outputs. We invented a way to do smart contracts in the UTXO context, and here that's going to pay dividends. But again, this is just sort of the layman's explanation of how great this is going to be. What we want to know is, what are we actually doing? How is this actually going to work? And for that, we have to dig a little bit deeper into their slightly more technical documentation. Here's the Bitsnark and Grell white paper. We're going to look at a few concepts from this white paper, but we're going to look at them over on the BitOS technical documentation that's available on the BitOS website because it's a little bit easier to read there and they kind of divide up the topics so they're a little bit easier to examine. But if you're interested in this white paper, I highly recommend you read it. It's only 10 pages long and it goes through the history of the work that came before BitOS, including Gregory Maxwell's work in 2013 all the way up to Robin Linus's BitVM paper just last year. So right off the bat, one thing to understand, BitSnark is a use of ZK snarks. So ZK snarks are zero knowledge, succinct, non-interactive arguments of knowledge. I know that's a mouthful, a lot of words, but if you want to understand at a very, very, very high level how this works, imagine we're in a crowded town square and you've got a safe, and inside that safe are a whole bunch of gold bars. And that safe, like safes generally, has a combination. It has a combination lock. We're standing in the town square on opposite sides. I'm on the other side of the square. You have the safe. I want to let you know that I have the combination to your safe. I can get in your safe, but I don't want everybody else in the town square to hear me yelling out, "Hey, I've got the combination to your safe," and you yelling, "Okay, fine. What's the combination?" Because then everyone in the town square will know the combination to the safe that we both know the combination of. We don't want anybody else to know. I just want to communicate to you to prove to you that I know the combination to this safe. So you can already tell we're describing something a lot like a blockchain here because on the blockchain, anything I communicate to you, everybody else can see as well, unless it's a blockchain like Midnight that has a shielded, unshielded duality or another privacy chain. That's a topic for another video. But for now, we have this problem. I want to prove to you that I know the combination you're safe, but I don't want everybody else to hear me say the combination you're safe, which would prove that I have the combination. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you know, hey, on the inside of the safe, there is a heart that says Tommy loves Shelly. And you'll know if you have also been inside that safe, and you have because you're safe, you'll know whether or not that is scratched on the inside of the safe. And then you'll know, hey, the only way, if you're the only one who's been inside the safe, the only way I could know that is if I have also been inside your safe, which means I do have the combination to your safe. So this is a way I could prove to you that I have something, the combination to your safe, without revealing that thing. In the past, we've talked a lot about different types of zero knowledge proofs, and we've even talked about zero knowledge, succinct, non-interactive arguments of knowledge, ZK snarks. And we've talked about use cases like being able to go to the bar and prove that you're 21 without having to show your ID, which has your home address to the bouncer. So there's some real world utility here. There's some real world use cases. And especially on the blockchain, being able to prove that you have something like this information, the combination to your safe, and you can translate that into blockchain terms very easily because we use all kinds of combinations, all kinds of keys to open various things in crypto, but we could prove we have something like that without providing the actual thing, which is very useful in a blockchain, which is, generally, if they're not privacy chains, are transparent to the whole world. So this is something that ZK snarks can do. And here we're dealing with BitOS's use of ZK snarks, which we're calling BitSnark. So BitSnark is useful for running the Grail bridge. So one thing to know about the Grail bridge right off the bat, a lot has been made already by BitOS and others about the lack of intermediaries in this BitOS technology we've been talking about. There are, however, operators. There are agents called operators on the Grail bridge, but it's not quite what we're used to when we talk about humans being involved in bridges. This section says operators monitor the bridge operations and assist users with deposits and withdrawals. They constantly monitor both the Bitcoin and rollup networks and participate in defined bridging protocol steps. A minimum of 2 operators are required to keep the bridge protocol going, but any number can be supported. That sounds a little scary. You're like, wait a second, this sounds exactly like intermediaries on normal bridges. This sounds like centralization. I don't know. Doesn't this just sound like a normal bridge? Well, here's something a little bit different. So they say security assumptions. While many systems rely on a majority vote in a threshold signature scheme for security, so a type of multisig, BitSnark provides stronger protection by allowing a single honest agent to prevent abuse by any or all of the other agents. This is referred to as a one of n, one of many trust assumption instead of an M of n, majority of many trust assumption. So this sounds a little better. I know the fact that operators are involved with this isn't exactly the same as if we said there are 0 humans involved in the Skrill bridge, but it does sound a lot better. The fact that we just have to have one honest operator out of whatever number of operators we have versus having to have a majority. This is a very different threshold security assumption. So I'm sure a lot will be discussed in terms of these operators. This is one of those things that people who want to criticize the Grail bridge and what BitOS is doing, this is going to be one of the things they're discussing. And I'm sure that discussion is going to happen ad nauseum on Twitter. So we'll get plenty of coverage down the road. But for now, let's just talk about how this thing actually works from your perspective as a user. And this we can sum up really easily. So, first, we'll look at this on a simplified basis, and then we'll get a little more complicated. So, operator transfers away from Bitcoin. So, we already said you're going to be dealing with operators who are going to help you use the bridge. Here's what the operators are going to do. Operators can lock funds on the Bitcoin side by sending them to taproot addresses created using BitSnark. Funds will be locked in a UTXO until a snark proof is provided to enable their retrieval. On the L2 side, operators send a snark proof to the bridge smart contract, which causes the bridge to mint tokens to the operator's wallet. So this sounds a lot like the bridges we're used to. Funds are going to be sent to an address, they'll be locked there, and then new tokens will be minted on the other side, on the L2 in this case. And of course, the opposite, receiving 2 Bitcoin, works exactly in the same way in reverse. In the reverse process to our previous example, an operator burns their tokens via the smart contract on the L2, thereby obtaining a snark proof that allows the operator to retrieve their funds on the Bitcoin side from the UTXO using the BitSnark protocol. So, if you want to know where all of the zero knowledge proofs and those kind of things come in, we can look at it in a little bit more detail over here. So, the deposit side, here we go. A user specifies a set of funding UTXOs. Now we're talking about the user, not the operator. A user specifies a set of funding UTXOs on the Bitcoin network and requests an address to make a deposit. Operators work together to generate an address and a set of pre-signed transactions. A taproot address is created using BitSnark. Confirm deposit. As soon as the operators have signed the required transactions, the deposit is confirmed and the user can initiate the transfer. Remember, we said there were pre-signed transactions. The user can verify that the address has been generated correctly and that all the requisite transactions have been signed before transferring their funds. That's good. Trust, but verify. Actually, this is crypto, so don't trust, just verify. Complete deposit. Given a proof of transfer to the accepted bridge deposit address on the Bitcoin network, the equivalent amount of the rollups token is transferred to the user in the rollup. And you could tell this is probably documentation that was written some time ago. So it was written in the ERC20 context. I'm sure eventually we're going to have documentation that probably explains exactly how the Grail bridge to Cardano would work. But then they say the locked UTXOs are registered in the smart contract and remain locked until a snark is generated to enable their retrieval. And here they have a nice little infographic chart explaining to you all of the steps and exactly how this can happen, both at the Bitcoin level, the operator level, and at the rollup level. So, have I examined the ZK circuits involved in the Grail bridge to say with certainty that this will be any safer than the kinds of bridges we've seen in the past, been the subject of huge thefts? Not at all. Would I even have the expertise to do so? Not at all. I have no ability to say whether or not the Grail bridge will be any safer than bridges that we know have previously been the site of a lot of the robberies going on in the robbery forest of crypto, especially in the EVM world. But the fact that this is one of N as opposed to M of N security assumption, that sounds good. But are we going to know how safe this really is until a lot of experts have looked at this and given us their opinion? Probably not. We're probably going to have to wait until the sort of public opinion of the people who are very well acquainted with how zero knowledge proofs work and how bridges work, until we have some security experts who can come out and tell us. I mean, not just one security expert doing an audit or something, but like many, many security experts. I personally am going to wait until I hear from a lot of people who say they think this is much safer than normal bridges. Even then, even then, I mean, I've said on this channel before, I've had Bitcoin for a long, long time. I think I acquired my first Bitcoin in like 2013 or 2014, and I've still got Bitcoin that goes back, maybe like a decade even now. But am I personally going to take my Bitcoin on my ledger and shoot it across some bridge so I can use it in Cardano? Even being a person who's held Bitcoin for a long time and a huge enthusiast of the Cardano ecosystem, probably not. There's probably no bridge you could create that would give me enough confidence to shoot my Bitcoin across it to use in Cardano. My Bitcoin is just going to stay on my ledger. Will a lot of people be willing to use a bridge like this, though? The answer to that question is probably a resounding yes. So, to explore that question, we can look at the blog entry that Bitcoin OS put out just today, Cardano's Time to Shine. And this is another one of those articles where they go to great pains to explain why Cardano is such a great pick. In fact, it's the only great pick for Bitcoin to use as its smart contract layer. But when we get past all of the excellent superlatives about Cardano, we get to this section, the Bitcoin opportunity. By plugging into Bitcoin, Cardano's years of thoughtful long term planning and building will be rewarded in an unprecedented way. For Bitcoiners moving their capital into new programmable environments, Cardano's years of careful construction and consistent performance make it a place they can depend on to secure their digital gold. As of October 2024, Bitcoin is a $1.3 trillion network. That is so big, guys. 57% of the entire crypto market and over 100 times the current value of ADA. So think about this. Our big new partner is 100 times the size of us. This is amazing. Cardano brings the owners of that capital trustless, secure access to the financial services that they want. Among the network's 1,300 plus other projects, users can try, and they're going to talk about some Cardano projects. We know that there's demand for these services, and this is the question we were just discussing. Over 147,000 wrapped Bitcoin, WBTC, currently circulate on Ethereum to fulfill this need, worth 9.75 billion at current prices. So think about that. The Ethereum is not even UTXO. It's harder. It's harder to transition from Bitcoin to Ethereum. It's not as convenient. They're not as compatible. And $9.75 billion of wrapped Bitcoin are circulating over there on Ethereum. And it's just wrapped Bitcoin, which went across a normal bridge. It's not even this very different new arrangement like we would have on the Grail bridge, where we're using zero knowledge proofs to sort of, in a way, transact directly from the Bitcoin base layer in Cardano. So this is a much better way to cross over into another ecosystem for people in Bitcoin. And even the old way, the kind of incompatible, janky way, when they had to do that with Ethereum, they still put $9.75 billion worth of wrapped Bitcoin on the Ethereum network. So they say, by comparison, DeFi Llama shows the Cardano's current total value locked. In DeFi, we had a lot of discussions about TVL, but for what it's worth, the current TVL is 225 million. So we've got a current TVL, according to this article, of 225 million in Cardano. And yet Bitcoin circulating on Ethereum is 9.75 billion. Even if we got a small portion of that in Cardano, this is game changing. This is a whole new world for Cardano. This is a whole new day. I think at this point, it's fair to say that, and a lot of people have been saying this over the last couple of days because I think it's so obvious and hopefully so true. Cardano has already built out this painstakingly constructed, meticulously crafted ecosystem where safety came first and speed of construction hilariously came last, according to our competitors. But we took our time to build out a really an ecosystem that really puts safety first, that really took its time to build things correctly. Maybe our reward is the biggest ecosystem in all of crypto deciding that we're the place they should do all of their smart contract stuff. We're the layer that should do all of the big computation. We're the place they should do all of their DeFi and their RealFi and their GameFi and their DPIN. Maybe all of those use cases, maybe all of that starts happening on Cardano. I mean, could there be some fatal flaw in all this? Some big problem we're not appreciating yet? Of course. Of course, there could be some problem with this whole Bit OS setup that we're not understanding right now. That could be very possible. It could be that this isn't as rosy a picture as we think it is at this point. But I have to say, if you're not excited about this, you're crazy. I can't even imagine something that could happen this cycle that could be bigger than this. I mean, sure, you could say, Argentina could make Cardano legal tender and put the entire government on our blockchain. Is that likely to happen this cycle? Not at all. Not at all. Is that likely to happen next cycle even? Who knows? With any nation state, who knows? The only blockchain that has even achieved that in any way, even a small sliver of that, has been Bitcoin in El Salvador. So we can't, but I mean, we can't count on those kinds of things happening. But I mean, short of that, this is kind of the biggest possible thing that could have happened. I don't think any of us could have even dreamed this up, really. I mean, we've talked about things like this, like what if, for I mean, all along, because we are UTXO and Bitcoin is UTXO, because UTXO is really UTXO, because we have that in common, we've always known, like it would make sense for Bitcoiners to start using Cardano. But something like this, I didn't hear anybody predicting something like this happening this cycle. I think this is one of the biggest things that's ever happened to this blockchain. If it really is what it looks like it is, this is one of the biggest things that's ever happened in Cardano. And you know what? I think we deserve it because this has been a long struggle. That struggle has really been composed of three steps. And for the last 698 videos and over 3.6 million views on this channel, you and me and all of us together have been discussing step one, pretty much just step one, which is build out the infrastructure. Step one was build out the infrastructure. And that's largely what we've been talking about on this video. Why? Because that's the foundation. You have to build out the soundest, most reliable, safest infrastructure in all of crypto. If you want to be the blockchain that wins the whole thing, the foundation has to be building out the very best infrastructure, the very best compromise of the blockchain trilemma, the very best optimization of every leg of the blockchain trilemma. You've got to be the best at everything. You've got to do the very best at this first step, building out the infrastructure. And that's largely what we've talked about on this channel for 698 videos. Step two is something else we've also talked about in these videos: securing a good regulatory environment. You've got to have a favorable regulatory environment. Now, no matter how good blockchains are, no matter how good crypto assets are, no matter how many use cases there are, no matter how much utility is presented by by cryptocurrencies and blockchains, if you have an unfavorable regulatory environment, the whole the whole sector, the whole blockchain thing is going to get crushed by governments. We came pretty close to that over the last 4 years. We came pretty close. And if we hadn't had so many people in crypto fighting against this oppressive choke point 2.0 thing that was going on, they would have crushed us. It was obvious that's what they wanted to do. We had powerful US senators literally putting giant posters on Twitter saying they were building an anti crypto army, thinking that people would rush to their aid. Instead, what happened is it just excited all of us, and we started sending candidates to crush those senators. Okay, that one senator in a debate in Massachusetts, but we fought back against this whole oppressive regulatory environment. And to be honest with you, there are some things going on in crypto that probably need to be reined in. There are bad actors in crypto, just like there are in any market, in the equities markets, in any market, any commodities market, any asset market you possibly imagine or name. There are bad actors. The same is true in crypto, and those bad actors do need to be reined in. That's normal for an emerging sector like this. It doesn't mean our whole our whole movement needs to be crushed or should be crushed. And that's one of the areas in which we've worked so hard ever since the founding of crypto. But especially in Cardano, I think people have been very aware of what's happening. I guess it's not even really just Cardano. It's the whole crypto space over the last, 5-ish years. We've been very aware, very cognizant of the regulatory forces who really were out to see us die. That was really part of their agenda, to see us die. We've managed to make it through that, and part of that is why I've paid so much attention, and maybe against their will forced other people in Cardano to pay attention to what was happening in politics over the last several months. A lot of people would say I focused even too much on it, but to me, it really was an existential issue for crypto. Whether a candidate got elected who was one half of an administration that really tried to kill us over the last 4 years, that oppressed us for 4 years, that created something we had to name Choke Point 2.0 because there was no better name for what they were doing. It was an existential matter whether the candidate who was half of that administration got elected again. Things are tight. We won't know until Tuesday. But I think we in crypto have done everything we could possibly do in our little corner of the world. I think we've done everything we could possibly do to try to ensure that a better regulatory environment, a more favorable regulatory environment waits for us next Tuesday. Hopefully that happens. Fingers crossed, but it's going to be tight, to be honest. Step number 3 was really a side effect of those first 2 steps: building out the infrastructure, securing a favorable regulatory environment. And that was securing the users. As we've talked about in this episode of the Cardano Rumor Rundown, I think that's what just happened last week. I think this whole new union between all of the enormous amount of assets in the Bitcoin ecosystem, this new union between Bitcoin and Cardano, I think that's really what this was. We did all the work, all the toil and struggle to build out the right kind of infrastructure, not take those shortcuts. It looks like we're also on the road to securing a more favorable regulatory environment. Again, we won't find out until Tuesday. And then, of course, the side effect of that is that the users materialize. The users find us. That seems to be what happened last week. So, Cardano, after 698 videos, all of us talking about this whole Cardano thing, now it's time to enter the end game. But this isn't going to be quick. This isn't going to be a 1 year thing. This isn't going to be a one cycle thing. This isn't going to be a single peak on the chart. And thank God, because all of us together, all of us in the community and the founding entities have spent the better part of a decade setting this up. If you go back to the launch of Cardano in 2017, a huge number of people's hopes and dreams and thoughts and review and contemplation and effort have gone into this thing we call Cardano. So thank God it's not going to be a quick thing. We spent too long and too much work to set all of this up. So now is the time for us to enjoy what we've built. And I hope it's not a quick thing. I hope it's a lasting, durable thing. And at the same time, I don't think a lot of our competitors are going to be able to catch up quickly because of all the work we put in with so few shortcuts. So now's the time, Cardano, when we should start enjoying the fruits of our labors. We don't need to fight amongst ourselves. We can just look out over this crazy thing we built and keep pressing forward always because let's face it, in Cardano, we're the kind of sled dogs that can't ride in the sled. So we'll be pushing forward always, but maybe from now on, we can do that from a position of advantage. I hope this is as much fun for you as I know it's going to be for me, and I'll talk to you soon.